Hello, Mr. Cove here with a Skull and Bones video today. Today we're going to be talking about weapons. We're going to be going over them in basic, but we'll also be showing how they work on each of the different ports. We'll be going through all of them. We'll be talking about how effective they are in the current meta. And then we'll also be ascending a weapon at the end so you guys can see that process from start to end. This video is going to be good for beginners that haven't seen all the weapons, kind of want to know what to use in what situation. And it should also be useful for people that have concentrated, maybe a few weapons, use a build guide. This will be able to show them the other weapons and maybe choices that they might make in the future for switching things out. So hopefully this video will have information, at least a little bit, for most people. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start with the Seafire. Let me go ahead and set that up, and then we'll take a look at that. Okay, so we're starting with the Seafire here. We're going to be using the bark for an example for all these weapons. This is a bow weapon. It can only go on the front, and it only has one gun port. It is essentially a giant flamethrower. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. It has a very short range. It does reload quickly though, so we'll go ahead and fire this off. So we're doing damage there, seeing our ammo go down. And we'll see how quick it reloads here. See, we're not really hitting him from there. He is burning, so that's why he's dying. Okay, so pretty simple weapon. Can be used for ships that want to be in close combat, maybe combining them with Demi Cannons, or if you're ramming and then want to follow up to that, that can be useful. In general, it is an underpowered weapon. The DPS just isn't very high. They have said that they want to improve this in the future. So it is a functional weapon. You can certainly use it, but it's generally not considered one of the better ones. But that's about it for that one. It uses oil canisters, and the ammo can be taken down rapidly since it's firing off a few times a second there. So you will want to keep an eye on ammo if it's something that you use frequently. All right, let's get to the next one here. All right, the next weapon we have is the Ballista. Great for shooting down dragons. It's basically a giant crossbow. This can be wound up. It uses ballista bolts, and again is the other bow weapon, so it can only be used in the front and only has one gun port here. So let's go ahead and check and see how we do this. So you'd hold down the weapon here until it is fully charged. That'll give the most damage, or you can also fire it without doing that if you want. So the charge does give more damage if you're loading up. And then it also extends the range of the bolt as well. So this can be an okay long range start. I don't find this weapon super useful, but since the damage can be loaded up before the fight begins, you can kind of get that one shot off, and have it do a significant amount of damage as the first shot. Still not great. I don't use it too much, but it's another tool in the toolbox here. That is about it for that one. Let's get to the next one. Okay, so the next weapon we're going to go over here is the Torpedo. It uses torpedoes as ammunition, and it is a top deck weapon. What that means is that you can use it on all four ports, but on the broadsides, the left and right, it will not benefit from the lower ports the way a couple guns would. So it's not going to have those additional gun ports on those sides. So let's go ahead and take a look here. You'll see the aiming indicator here. This is in the front. And generally you're going to have 2 gun ports on the front. And 3 on the broadsides. Two in the back. And then again 3 on the other side. Now these do have a long range, and you see this red part here. That is going to be basically where they arm. The white part is going to be after they arm. So they do much more damage after they arm. You kind of see they glow differently afterwards. So these are best used as medium range or against targets that aren't moving. You want to fire these past this red range here, but you know, on a long range target, it's easy for them to dodge as well. So see, these just aren't doing as much damage by firing close here. Now they do still do some damage, so they're still better than nothing. I do like to use them as kind of an opening hit for a lot of my ships on the front. But because they don't use the bottom deck, I don't prefer them on the broadsides. Now you can spec to have more on the broadsides through PvP perks and stuff like that, but in general you're not gonna get the full benefit from the broadsides. So in general it's not a weapon that I use on those. So very effective weapon, best against stationary targets or mid-range targets that are not able to dodge. And then again, you want to get past that arming point for maximum damage. But very effective weapon. A lot of people use them. Very good weapon in the meta currently. Let's go ahead and get to the next one. Okay, the next weapon we're going to be looking at are the Bombards. These are also top deck weapons, so they can go on all 4 ports, but like the Torpedoes, they're not going to benefit from the bottom deck of the broadsides. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. They do have AoEs as well. Now the gun ports for these, they are single shot, so the more gun ports you have, the more shots you'll get before, you know, the reload. But they are independently reloading, so so the more gun ports you have, just the more shots you'll get off here. But they are single shot per. Now a lot of people consider these the best weapons. I'm not a big fan of them compared to some of the other weapons. They are harder to aim, and I'm not particularly good with that. I think their best use are secondary siege weapons for towers, where you're aiming at a big target, you're able to measure it up, and I like putting it on the rear as well. For example, a ship passes you, you broadside them, they get a little bit behind you. That's a very easy shot, and you see the circle there for the AoE. So that's when the aiming can be very easy. I don't consider the DPS to be worth the struggle with aiming otherwise. But again, they can be spec'd to do a lot of siege damage too, so they can be a primary siege weapon or a secondary if you have them on the back. I've certainly used them like that. But they do have AoE, they can hit multiple targets, they do have pretty good damage, and again, a lot of people consider these their favorite weapons. So another very effective one, something you want to get good with aiming though, if it's something that you use often, and I don't, so I'm not great with them. Alright, let's go ahead and get to the next one. Oh, by the way, those use Bombard bombs, so there's separate ammo for them as well. Okay, the next weapon we're going to be looking at is the Culverin. Now this is kind of your standard weapon, your basic cannonball shooter that uses cannonballs. And this is the first of the all-deck weapons. So What that means is that it can be used in all 4 ports, but it also benefits from the bottom deck on the broadside, so it'll get more gun ports than other weapons when you use it on the sides here. This is a single shot weapon, kind of like the Bombard, where you just continue to fire. There are some Culverins that do fire all of the guns at once, but most of them are just going to be single shot and you just continue to fire. So we'll go ahead and look at that here. And you see how the reload is similar to the Bombard, where it is reloading each one individually that you fired. And you can just hold the gun down to shoot multiple, and you see how there was more firing on the broadsides here. Now these do have an arc, so they're not as easy to aim as some weapons. They are best in medium and short range. Their benefits are that they do have a decent amount of DPS and they do have a pretty good load time. So if you can get good with these are kind of the standard versatile broadside weapons. Since these can fire a lot, especially on like the frigate that'll get 13 on the broadsides, you can run out of cannonballs fairly quickly, so do want to be watching your ammo with these. These can be spec'd in a bunch of different ways, so again, a very versatile weapon, kind of depending on how you're playing it. They can be very good and then also not too great, so kind of just depends on how you play them. A lot of people use them though, so it is definitely in the meta and a good weapon. Alright, let's go ahead and get to the next one. Okay, the next weapon we're going to be looking at here is the Demi Cannon. This is the other all-deck weapon, so like the Culverin, it benefits from the additional bottom ports on the broadsides. Uses cannonballs, and then unlike the Culverin, it fires all of its gun ports at once. It is a short-range weapon, essentially a shotgun. Let's go ahead and take a look. Not doing much damage here since we're kind of at the extent of its range here. So you can see this has a very quick reload time, and since it does have those additional gun ports on the broadside, it can be the highest DPS in the game if you're close enough to be hitting all the shots. This is currently my favorite weapon in the game on the broadsides. Culverin is more versatile, but this Demi Cannon is capable of pumping out a ton of damage. So we're just using crappy ones here to illustrate, but and then for example on the frigate that gets additional gun ports on the broadside, it really benefits from the Culverin and Demi Cannon, so those can really burst out a ton of damage if you get into a broadside fight with a frigate. So since we are firing all gun ports at once, though, you can, again, run through your cannonballs very quickly, so keep that in mind. To keep enough ammo, even 1,000, you can go through very quickly here. So, and there's a bunch of different specs for these as well. So, whether you want to do fire or flooding or whatever. There's a lot of different ways to spec this. And you see when we're within range to kind of hit them all, even this crappy one does a ton of damage. Okay, So that's it for the Demi Cannon. Let's go ahead and get to the next one. Okay, the next gun we're going to be looking at is the long gun. This shoots cannonballs. It is essentially a longer, harder hitting Culverin, so it has less arc on its shots. It is a top deck weapon though, so it's not going to benefit from the additional ports on the broadsides. This is a very useful weapon for long range builds, and although it doesn't get the additional ports on the sides, if you're playing a strictly long range build, you can put them on the broadsides and be effective with them as well. Let's go ahead and take a look here. So like the Culverin, it's a single shot. Even though you have multiple gun ports, you do reload them individually. So you see we're reloading quicker on the broadsides because we have more gun ports, so that's how we're getting more shots off here. Okay, so even though I'm not very accurate with this at the moment here, this can be good for hitting weak spots since it is easier to aim than most of the other weapons. So there are a lot of specs for that, as well as just ships that benefit from attacking from long range and getting damage bonuses with that. So a lot of times you're going to be speccing for weakness and long range here with this. And again, even though it doesn't benefit from the additional gun ports, a lot of ships that are specializing in long range will want to put them on the broadsides anyways. So. Okay, so that's about it for that one. Unlike the other two cannonball ones, this one, conserves your ammo better, so you don't have to worry about it that as much. They're just slower reloads and longer hitting. So, all right, let's get to the next one. Okay, so now we've reached the auxiliary weapons. You only have one auxiliary port, and small ships do not have an auxiliary port. There's a few different kinds here, and they are all very powerful. We're going to be looking at the Springloader that has buoy shells, first of all. A lot of Springloaders are spec'd for healing. We're going to be looking at a damage version that lays mines here. And you do only get the one gun port with this, except for the frigate. That does have two gun ports, although they do still have to be individually fired. Now if we're kind of looking at this, this is my bark that's spec for healing, so it does have two essentially two buoy gun ports, or able to fire off two at once. So that's why I'm able to do that here, but essentially this is just laying mines out next to the ship here, and we're able to do damage with that. So I would say most of the time these are used for healing specs. You see how big the radius is on the circle, so if we were to put this down, this would be healing yourself and all their ships within this radius, so it can be very effective for healing for the healing ship's bark and brig. So what the damage version of this is useful for is basically just having an area that people don't want to go into. A lot of ways to counter this. People will use torpedoes to shoot these mines that will destroy them before they get in there. They do have a duration, so once the buoy's expired, then you would lose the mines as well. So usually they last about 30 seconds unless you expect to have them last a little longer. I'm not a giant fan of the damage version, but the healing buoys are very effective and kind of a main source of healing for the healing ships. So, all right, well, that's the first aux one. Let's go ahead and get to the next one. Okay, the next auxiliary weapon we're going to go over here is the rocket. It shoots rockets, and it usually shoots a bunch, so you can go through ammo very quickly with that. Kind of show you how it works here. Now you can be changing your aim as you're firing, so you just hit the button, it'll fire all of them, and then you can re-aim if you're shooting at a moving target. Now if you're shooting at a slow or stationary target, you can also do this. This guy's moving, so it won't work quite as well, but for example, we can just fire it, get to another weapon, it'll continue to fire, and then we can shoot other things at once. So with the ability to do that, that is its best use case. If you're able to fire that off and then use other weapons, the additional DPS that you're gaining from using the rocket is very significant. So if you're shooting at a big ship that isn't moving very fast or very close to you, this is a great weapon to use. Let's kind of look at the range. It does have good range, not quite as good as the Mortar, but still very good. And then kind of its downfall would be shooting at fast targets where you're forced to re-aim as you're doing it, so you're not taking advantage of the fact that you can be firing other weapons while this is going off. This can be spec'd in a variety of ways. It can be good for siege, spec'd for fire, all types of things. So very good weapon. A lot of people use this, and it is pretty versatile since it is good against ships and and towers as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get to the next one. Okay, the last weapon we have here is the Mortar. This is an extremely long-range weapon with a giant radius here. Its downfall is it does have a minimum range. See, this is as far or as close as we can shoot with it, and it also has a very long projectile time, besides being a one-shot with a long reload. So let's go ahead and see. We're trying to hit this ship. Let's try it. And we didn't hit it towards the center, so it did do less damage, but it still hit it pretty well. Now this isn't a very effective PvP weapon because of the minimum range and because it has such a long projectile time. It also will give an indicator on the ground, just like the towers will against you. So in PvP, people will just generally move. But if you do get someone just wants to sit there, it is a great counter to that. So in PvE, it's going to be best used as a siege weapon, and then also against targets that are stationary. You'll have the long boats that are just shooting long guns at you that will sit there and not move out of your mortars. You can oftentimes one-shot them with mortars. So that is about it here. This is more of a anti-ship mortar than we're using an example here, but you can have, like on my frigate, those will hit weak spots for over 70k easy with the mortar. So on buildings, so very good against towers and forts and things. And then again, the frigate gets 2 gun ports with this. Everybody else gets 1. So very good on the frigate for doing plunders and stuff. All right, so that's about it for the weapons. Again, you can kind of see that these are mostly preferential. The Seafire and Ballista aren't very used, but most of the other guns have their place in the game depending on the style that you're using them with. So I would suggest that you guys try them all out and see what you like. And again, on different builds, some of these are going to be very useful, and then with other builds, not so much. We're going to go ahead and go over ascending a weapon now. So we will pause it and get to that. Okay, so now I'm going to take you through the ascension process for a gun here. We're going to be using a long gun 5. The reason we're going to use this is because you can ascend these 4 times. Now most people will use blue and purple weapons, and those can't ascend 4 times, but they start with perks that generally make those weapons better than starting with a gray weapon that you can ascend more times. But it will give us more options, so we'll be able to go through the process and see how it goes here. So let me go ahead and make that, and then we'll take a look at ascending it. Okay, so we've crafted our long gun 5 here. We see that we have 4 different ascensions that we can put on it. You do have to go in order here, so you ascend the first step, and then the second step, third step, fourth step. Now, in order to go through this process and get what you want, which you may not be able to do exactly since there's only so many ascension times that you can do it on a weapon, this is extremely costly. So if you haven't done this yet, be aware that this is the main silver sink in the game. It also uses a lot of materials as well if you're trying to get something specific, or you're trying to re-roll for better rolls. Now in the future they are going to make this so that you can lock in a certain spec and then just try to roll higher for that one, so it should be easier and less costly in the future. But right now this can be very costly. So we're going to go ahead and have a concept that we're going to try to shoot for, and you guys can kind of see going through the process and how expensive it really is to try to do that. And we may run out of rolls as well, so we'll see how that goes. So the first thing we're going to do is the first one. Now we're going to be trying for more weak point damage on this long gun. So that's kind of our theme for this gun. So let's go ahead and do that. We're also going to be doing piercing damage as well, since that goes along with weak point damage. So let's go ahead and scroll through here and just see all of the options that we can do. That way you know what you're looking for here. So also just as a basic concept, for example, Demi Cannons that have more shots and less damage per shot, they may benefit from this base damage where you see example like flooded, it's adding 39 to 57 flooding damage. Most other weapons are going to benefit from the percentage instead. So that is not something we're going to shoot for here. We'd rather have, for example, the shock that does a percentage damage. That's going to add more overall damage than what adding flat damage is to a shot, because we're starting at like 2,000 something, so adding 50 to that is not going to be as much as adding 8% or 10% damage. So what we're going to try to do here is get that piercing resistance. So that's what we're going to go for to start here. So we're going to go ahead and ascend the item. Once you ascend it, you can't trade it, so that's what it's telling you here. It is bound to you. So we're going to go ahead and say yes. And then you just get something, right? Okay, so this is not what we wanted. This isn't terrible. You see that it also put a dot up top that says that we have ascended this weapon once, and it improved our gear score as well. Now a higher roll on something will show up as yellow, and that will improve your gear score as well, and you'll be able to see that when you've ascended it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go back, and we're going to keep trying. We want that piercing resistance, so that's what we're going to try for here. So when you reforge, you get an option of keeping what you had or taking the new one. Now if we accept one of these, we go ahead and go accept. If we want to reforge again, you see we have the reforge temps. 59 starts at 60. That accounts for all 4 of our ascensions. So if we don't get lucky here and get what we want with the first couple, for example, you might want to just make a new one and try again. And you can see how quickly you can go through your resources by doing this to get exactly what you want, right? So we'll go ahead and do that again. All right, since this is just standard damage, we'd rather have that one compared to what we had. We'll go ahead and leave that for now, and we'll go back to piercing if we can get something better. All right, so you see the cost here. This also costs pieces of 8 now, ascension modules, some other parts, a lot of silver, right? Okay, and since we've ascended it a second time, the base score has gone up again. This is the added damage per shot, so again, not what we want. We're trying to get that piercing percentage here, so let's go ahead and reforge again. See, this is using upgrade parts and silver up top. All right, so you see how this is yellow? That's because that's a high roll. So that's what that's showing you there. We'll go ahead and do that one for now. And you see how that also increased our gear score. All right, just a second here. Okay, and then as we're going through this, you can also hit info and it'll pull up your weapon so you can kind of see what's going on with it, what you've already added, and what the effect of those perks had on it already. All right, we're going to go ahead and go to the next one here. I see as we go through here, the prices are escalating. So and you see we have basic. These are going to both be within the same pool, and you can get the same one for each of these. And then advanced is going to have its own pool, so you want to look through these. And then special is going to have its own pool as well. So just know that these are different pools that they're rolling through. But when you have like 2 basics, we could have essentially this one show up twice if we wanted to. You don't have to have different ones within that. Okay, so we see here within advanced that we have weak point damage right here. So that is what we're going to be shooting for. So we're going to go ahead and try to re-roll for that as well. Okay, we like this better than what we have, so we'll go ahead and take that. But we're going to continue to re-roll it here. And I also need to go grab some pieces of 8 to finish this. Let me go do that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do the last ascension here. What we're looking for here is this one that increases our weak point damage. So we're going to go ahead and try for that one and see how it works. Now basically, there's 2 different ways to ascend an item. I'm kind of doing it in the second way where you're assuming that you're going to use this item and just kind of want to get the best rolls for whatever build you're doing, but you plan on using it. In that case, you kind of, as we're going through here, we're kind of taking okay ascensions and then moving on, and then we can go back and use our rolls to further try to upgrade those. Another way to do it, if you have a lot of resources, is to just focus on the first one, try to get a really high roll for exactly what you want. If you don't, you kind of throw away that weapon and start again, right? And then you're just, instead of wasting resources on the future ascensions, you see this last one's quite expensive. You're using the re-rolls early to get exactly what you want because you want the perfect weapon. So that would be something to do if you have a lot of resources, you're looking for exactly what you want, and you can afford to try this on a bunch of weapons before you settle on the one. The way we're doing it here is more of we want this weapon in our build, so we're going to kind of use our rerolls to get the best that we can get, but we kind of move on once we get an okay roll, and then we'll go back to it if we have rerolls remaining. So that's how I'm doing this ascension process with the notion that we're going to use this item. All right, now that one isn't horrible either. Certainly be good for a Garuda there, but not exactly what we wanted, so we'll go ahead and try to get that again. It also was yellow, meaning it high rolled. This one isn't horrible either. If we wanted to use that to take closer shots where we knew we were going to hit them and we're targeting weak points, not terrible for our build either. Severe damage, much more useful for PvP. You can see how this is quite expensive if we're trying to get exactly what we want there. That is the one we want, so we'll go ahead and take that one, and then we'll move through the other ones. Now what this means, existing piercing damage, this is to get a status effect. So what piercing can cause is punctured, which lowers armor. So that's what this essentially does. It gets to the status effect quicker, even though it isn't raising the overall damage. So not exactly what we want here. We're still looking for weak point damage here. You see that one. So we're going to go ahead and try that one again. All right. So we could go for piercing resistance. We could go for overall damage. Reload time also wouldn't be terrible. Or we just get the piercing damage. So I think that's what we want to shoot for again instead of the flat. This isn't adding much compared to adding that percentage. So we're going to go for that piercing damage as a percentage here. The basic damage that we have in the first one, that's just going to be less than piercing damage since it's generic. So it's not bad. It still helps our build, but it's not as good as getting that specific one. All right, again, that's better than nothing. So since we're assuming we're going to use this item, we still want to take the upgrade over what we previously had as we're doing it. But we're not done. We still have some rerolls, so we want to go ahead and try to get something better. Alright, again, taking that one because it's just a better roll of what we already had. And we're going to move up to this one since this is lower than the other one. So we'll go ahead and continue to use our rerolls on that one. All right, so the rationale behind this being better than the lower damage up there is that we're assuming that in our spec, because we're trying to get piercing damage, that we have some sort of bonus towards piercing damage, like with our equipment, our ship, etc. So we're assuming that this is going to add more damage, even though it's lower rolled, because it's that specific damage type, if that makes sense. So we're going to go ahead and take that. And we're going to go back down to this one to try to get piercing damage. All right, last roll, we got it there, and it is a better roll than the other one we had, so that's good. Okay, so we basically completed this with our last reroll. We wanted piercing damage. That does bonus damage to weak points. Our last two picks here have weak point damage, and then we're assuming that we have spec'd the rest of our ship in a way that takes advantage of this piercing and weak point damage. So you see how expensive that was. We used all our rerolls. We have no high rolls on any of these. So you can see how this is quite expensive. And if you were trying to get high rolls and exactly what you wanted, you can assume you're going to try this on multiple weapons, and have to. That's why you'd want the blueprint. You get to make a bunch. And then as you're going through this, you're trying to get high rolls on everything you want exactly. And right now that's really hard, even with 60 rerolls. So you saw, just to get the actual ones that we wanted, not even thinking about the rolls, that took literally all 60 rolls just to get that. So I do want to go over basic things about weapons now, and then we'll be done. Explosive damage, that essentially adds an AoE. Piercing that we're looking at here does more damage to weak points, but it also can create the status effect of punctured, which lowers the armor of a target. We have fire damage that eventually can add burning once you get that status effect. We have tearing, which tries to take out the sails to disable a ship so it can't move. So that can be good if you're trying to fight, close up or something, and keep a target there next to you. Shooting sails, though, does very little damage, so that really kind of goes into like a PvP thing where you're setting up ships for other ships to kill. Flooding, that adds, like fire, adds a damage over time effect, but that also does severe damage to the target as well, so that's better than PvP. And then we have basic damage, which is just a generic damage as well. And then we have a dog here, so you get to say hi to them. So that's about it. I hope that helped everyone, and let me know what you guys think about how we're going to be doing this ascension process when we can actually lock in one of these stats. I hope it's going to be much easier, because trying to get high rolls on this stuff is really hard and expensive at the moment. So all right, that is it. You guys have a good one, and I'll see you next time.